All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're digging into a massive shift in the global economy, something that's making headlines everywhere. China is selling off its US government debt. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a simple transaction, right? But it could be a move that totally changes the balance of power for decades to come. So let's break it down.
You know, history is just littered with these moments. When a dominant power's currency starts to wobble, its influence isn't usually far behind. And today, we're seeing what might be the early signs of something just like that happening with the United States dollar, the very backbone of America's global power.
So what is really happening here? I mean, yeah, it's a financial headline, but if you look just underneath the surface, it's a story about strategy, about politics, and about a fundamental shift in who holds the power. And look, we are not talking about some minor portfolio adjustment here. When China, one of the biggest foreign holders of US debt, starts selling on this scale, it's sending a crystal clear signal to the entire world, a loss of confidence in America's ability to manage its own finances.
For decades, this was basically the deal. Countries like China bought up these IOUs, and in doing so, they were pretty much bankrolling America's spending. In return, the US got all the cash it needed to run these massive deficits. It worked for a long time.
And this is the big reason why that confidence is starting to crack. With a national debt that has soared past $30 trillion, I mean, that's a number that's hard to even wrap your head around, the US government just keeps borrowing more money to cover its past borrowing. If you're China, holding trillions in paper that's losing value, well, it starts to look like a really bad bet.
Okay, so to really get why this is such a huge breakup, we first need to understand the deal that held these two economic giants together for so long. You see, it used to be this really stable, kind of perfect cycle for both sides. It was mutually beneficial. But now, that cycle is completely broken. China is making it clear that it no longer sees holding so much American debt as a safe or even profitable strategy. This analogy from the source, man, it just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It's such a powerful way to visualize what many people see as a totally unsustainable path for the US economy. And it's a huge reason why China is changing its whole strategy.
So this isn't some random, rash decision. No way. This is a calculated move. Surging U.S. inflation means those bonds are simply worth less and less over time. And beyond just the economics, China is strategically trying to depend less on a financial system that the U.S. has, let's be honest, used as a political weapon.
This decision by China doesn't just mess with bond markets. It's a direct challenge to the very foundation of America's global power, the US dollar itself. And when that foundation starts to shake, everything built on top of it becomes unstable.
You know, for generations, America has enjoyed this thing called exorbitant privilege. It's this incredible, unique benefit where it could basically print money to pay its bills, all because the rest of the world needed dollars for trade. But even a privilege like that has its limits, and China's actions are making those limits very visible. And you can see how this creates this chain reaction, right? It's like dominoes. When a huge buyer like China walks away from the market, the US has to sweeten the deal to attract new buyers. That means offering higher interest rates. That makes it more expensive for the government to borrow, which eventually puts a strain on the entire US economy. And as the dollar gets questioned, you better believe alternatives are popping up all over the place. Nations like China are diversifying their holdings into things like gold. The BRICS countries, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, are actively building new systems to trade with each other without using the dollar at all. They're building escape routes.
So what we're really talking about here, this whole financial story, it's actually something much bigger. It's a loud, unmistakable signal that the balance of power in the world is tilting away from just singular US dominance and moving toward a multipolar future.
To really get the scale of this moment, you kind of have to zoom out and look back. The entire world order that was set up after World War II, the one that put the US and its dollar at the very center of global finance, that order is now being seriously challenged. And this sell-off is a major chapter in that story.
Now the source makes a really critical point here. It argues that the U.S. has frequently used its control over the dollar to impose sanctions, basically cutting entire countries off from the global financial system. But when you turn money into a weapon, you can't be surprised when other nations start building defenses.
Okay, so global finance, bond markets, why should any of this actually matter to you, right? Well, because this global drama has intensely personal consequences. The cost of empire, of decades of debt, it eventually lands right on the shoulders of ordinary people. And here's exactly how it hits home. A weaker dollar?
That means stuff we import costs more. Boom, inflation. The higher interest rates the government has to pay to borrow money, those translate directly to more expensive mortgages, car loans, and credit card debt for every single one of us. It's a chain reaction that hits every household budget.
So, faced with this new reality, the source describes the U.S. political response not as, calm and collected problem solving, but as something closer to panic. Instead of actually addressing the root causes, the tendency is to lash out, deny responsibility, and just find someone else to blame.
And to capture this, the source uses this really sharp analogy. It suggests this total disconnect between China's calculated, strategic moves, playing chess, and a much more blunt, reactive response from American political leaders. It just captures that sense of panic when control starts to slip.
Ultimately, what the source is arguing is that this whole crisis just rips the mask off the system itself. A system built on endless debt, where when a crisis hits, the rewards are protected at the top while all the risks and the losses flow down to working people. The mask, it says, is slipping off.
And that leaves us with this final, incredibly powerful question. The world is shifting. The old order is trembling. And the real challenge is whether this moment becomes a lesson learned or just another mistake repeated on the long, long arc of history. That, right there, is the challenge of our time.